starting with Republicans. How has the shutdown seemed to have affected their political standing?
Yeah, you might think, given that the Republicans are in charge of both the House and the Senate, that a government shutdown might actually hurt the Republican brand. But in fact, it hasn't. If anything, it's been helped a little bit. Take a look here, the shift in net popularity versus pre-shutdown. When we're looking at the Republican Party overall, that brand actually up 2 points. That's within the margin of error, but clearly it hasn't dropped. Come over to this side of the screen. Look at the net approval ratings for Republicans in Congress. It's actually up 5 points since pre-shutdown. So what we're seeing here is the Republican brand in Congress has actually improved somewhat. And that's the math that John Thune and Mike Johnson are looking at is, well, hey, why should we give, and electorally speaking, when our brand has actually improved a little bit?
So although they've publicly shown no signs of giving up, it does appear that the internal pressure is beginning to mount for Democrats to stop the charade and finally end the government shutdown, and it's coming from a number of different fronts within their own constituency. On one hand, we have something we've talked about for a while, which is the federal workers, right? The people supposedly Democrats are trying to save from Trump firing them by shutting down the government and allowing Trump to mass fire them. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Or this EBT SNAP issue, where Democrats are apparently, quote unquote, starving a bunch of their own voters to stop Donald Trump or something. These strategies really don't make a whole lot of sense. And now we even have the labor unions, a group that has been very pro-Democrat, right? The unions are essentially a political machine for that political party, now turning against the shutdown as well, essentially saying, look, for the actual working people, especially who have jobs in any ways connected to the government or government contracting, this is not actually a good thing for us. And you're appeasing essentially in the process, as the supposed working class party, right? A bunch of people who don't work. Because when we're talking about the radical, violent left voter base, it's either a bunch of wealthy retirees who are showing up to these No Kings protests, or the lazy socialists who are essentially living off the government, or they're paid protesters for Soros and they don't have full-time jobs anyway. So they're essentially saying, what about us? So in today's video, I want to bring you some of those updates. As The Hill is reporting, yeah, I mean, internally, there does seem to be a little bit of dissent, and we'll see how much longer this is actually able to go for, as well as even revisit this EBT SNAP issue, because Democrats, as usual, are now coming out and responding to Trump cutting off the benefits, by the way, because there's literally not the money to fund those benefits, and saying Donald Trump is starving people. And it's like, okay, first of all, who shut down the government? But also, secondly, another unintended consequence, right? I keep comparing the Democrats to like Looney Tunes villains here, essentially, from the cartoons that have some crazy plan. Oh, we're going to throw the boomerang. Oh, it hit me back in the face. Oh, let's drop the anvil with a TNT. Oopsie, it fell on me instead. Okay, they're like the coyote or something like that, trying to chase the roadrunner, because you know, before all of this, I would argue that the question of mass welfare fraud, especially EBT fraud, although it was talked about, was not really at the forefront of conservative politics. But now that the Democrats have brought it to light with all of these new announcements and, you know, SNAP getting cut off and all of that, now, you know, honestly, you might actually be exposing a huge way in which your own voters are living. And it turns out, I don't know, that lifestyle, guys, might be in a little bit of jeopardy. So we'll talk about all of that, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And that said, so let us start by bringing you this reporting from The Hill, which highlights, again, the labor union issue and many others. So pressure is building on Democrat and Republican leaders to end the 28-day shutdown after the nation's largest federal workers union, not just any labor union, federal workers union, this is as pro-Democrat as it can get, as you can imagine, right, called for an end to the stalemate as rank and file GOP lawmakers are sounding the alarm over rising health insurance premiums. And there's that debate, right? Some people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are saying we should extend the Obamacare tax subsidies. But again, the Republicans have said that debate can come, the healthcare debate can come when you reopen the government, right? You're not going to hold all this garbage hostage just to, you know, talk about, oh, unless you give Medicaid to illegals, we are going to make sure that all the poor people, according to us, right? Because this is how we frame these issues, the poor people are going to starve. It's like, okay, Anyways, but this blunt message is coming from Everett Kelly, the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, and it's one of the biggest developments they're noting here in the month-long standoff, right? And that should be true. When you're talking about a group so influential within Democrat politics now turning against the Democrat Schumer shutdown, that's pretty significant. Take a listen here for some of those details.
And basically said the American Federation of Government Employees are normally a bunch of lefties, labor union. Both parties have made their point on the shutdown. No clear end. It's time to pass a clean continuing resolution and end this shutdown today. Sir, this labor union is mirroring what you and President Trump are saying. Seems like bad news for Chuck Schumer that a labor union is telling him pass a clean CR.
You know, Ed, that's exactly what the House of Representatives did on September the 19th. And if the Senate, they need 60 votes in the Senate. They've gotten the Republicans. They need Democrats to cross over and do the right thing. Let's do the right thing. Let's keep federal employees paid, these essential employees. Let's make sure that SNAP benefits don't get cut off. I know that there are 7 or 8 Democrats that should do the right thing, and the union validated the position of House Republicans and Senate Republicans and President Donald Trump.
Just today, the American Federation of Government Employees, large union, came out and said, quote, "It's time to pass a clean, continuing resolution and end this shutdown today. No half measures and no gamesmanship." And the union went on to say today, quote, "Because when the folks who serve this country are standing in line for food banks after missing a second paycheck because of this shutdown, they aren't looking for partisan spin. They're looking for the wages they earned. The fact that they're being cheated out of it is a national disgrace." And they're right. It's a national disgrace what Democrats are doing to good, hardworking people, to women, infants, and children who are just looking to this town and saying, what are these Democrats doing? What happened to your father's Democrat Party? It's a mirage of what it used to be because the socialists have taken over. This is what Marxism and socialism looks like. Government workers standing in food bank lines, children going without food, and Head Start nutrition programs so that Democrats can use you as leverage. It's a national disgrace, and it needs to end now. We stand ready to get that job done. We voted to get that job done. It's time they stop playing this game that's harming millions of people.
Well, I mean, that's a great point, although who knows? Maybe the Democrats, maybe Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are actually big-time conservative patriots, okay? And they too agree that we need to be cutting off welfare, EBT, Section 8, all of these things. We need to be drastically cutting the federal workforce and reducing the size of the federal government. And it's all just one big ploy, okay? Donald Trump is secretly in control of the entire thing. It's probably what QAnon honestly would be saying if it were still around or ever really existed. But no, in all seriousness here, I think the strategy is obvious because it doesn't really make sense unless you rationalize it in one direction, which is, this is the point, right? They want to intentionally inflict a bunch of pain, mostly against their own voters. You could say there's an irony in that, but maybe there's not. The whole point is to basically be able to then go to them and say, see, look, Donald Trump did this to you. Donald Trump is why you lost your job. Donald Trump's why you lost your food stamps or you're standing in a food line or whatever it is. And therefore, please go vote against him in the next election. However, it would appear that plan is coming apart a bit. If you have the biggest federal workers union, a very influential group in your party's politics, saying, no, actually, this is your guys' fault, basically, and we want you to end this as well. So what impact will that have? Again, it remains to be seen. It's kind of a weighing of interests here between Democrats trying to save face and keep semi-presentable optics to the American people. And again, their real strategy of let's try to inflict pain and then blame it on Trump, right? A classic false flag, you could say, almost a misdirection is essentially here what they're doing. But anyways, the statement from the workers union appeared to be aimed squarely at Senate Democrats who have voted a dozen times to block a clean 7-week continuing resolution. And by the way, only 7 weeks, right? So we could debate this. You have the next 2 months, essentially, to talk about Obamacare. It's not like we're funding it till next year. But of course, Democrats don't want to do that. And by the way, at the end of the 7 weeks, they're probably going to shut down the government again, right? They're going to say this time it's over ICE raids or something. But anyways, and it came from someone representing 820,000 federal and Washington, D.C. workers. Yeah, well, that is a lot of people. By the way, you have a key upcoming election in Virginia. Make sure you go vote, by the way. So, who knows what impact that will have, but we'll see. In calling on Congress to pass a clean continuing resolution, Kelly argued, yes, that both political parties had made their point. It's time to bring all of these people back to work. Now, interestingly, though, Senate Democratic Whip, basically second in command to Chuck Schumer behind the scenes, Dick Durbin, said that the statement would, quote, have a lot of impact and Democrats would discuss it in the days ahead. Now, that's not really saying much, but it is saying a little something, right? It does seem to be a suggestion that maybe behind the scenes, a change like this could be the pressure that Democrats need from within their own ranks to abandon their insane strategy of inflicting a bunch of pain on their own people. And keep in mind, you need 60 votes, which, by the way, I would also argue while we're on the topic, perhaps it is time to either lower or abolish the filibuster if you're the Republicans, okay? You can clearly see you're not going to get any reasonable... You talk about fiscal conservatism, you think you're ever going to be able to pass a budget with these people around. They want to do it anyway. That's a mainstream idea in progressive politics. You could do that, or at least lower it. Do it 55, right? You can get Fetterman and one other, and that's all you need. You don't have to grandstand and try to win Chuck Schumer. You know what I mean? But anyways, quote, they've been our friends and they've worked with them. We've worked with them over the years. I've had a good connection with them and I've talked to them. They're in a terrible mess. So many of their workers are not being paid, Durbin had said of the union. So who knows? And here's the outcome of this, I guess I could see, is that Schumer still trying to fend off that primary challenge from AOC, still trying to appease the radical left base. Maybe he doesn't vote for it, but behind the scenes, you'll find 5 Democrat senators who are either about to retire or they're maybe in a very swing state or something and say, hey, you guys go vote, you will be the fall guy, and then we'll say, oh, well, there's nothing we could do, our own caucus rebelled. Maybe that'll happen, who knows? But even so, other major unions, including the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which represent basically over like 2 to 3 million federal and government workers combined, have still not broken with the Democrat position. So we'll see if these end up going as well. But of course, the second major issue is that Durbin, the number 2 Senate ranking Democrat leader, said that the expiration of SNAP, right, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, starting November 1st is another major concern, right? Besides a small group of people who are disabled or elderly, the reality is the vast majority of SNAP benefits are going to a bunch of basically fraudsters and grifters, right? Who overwhelmingly are, guess what? Guess what party these people are voting for? So this is going to be really interesting. The SNAP program feeds 1 out of 8 Americans, and I've said a lot about it. I've heard a lot about it back home over the years, adding that the looming shortfall in SNAP is driving a sense of urgency in the Senate Democratic caucus. So I think the difference you're seeing is, there's probably a handful of Democrat senators out there who maybe actually think the shutdown thing is not the best idea because they're not insane radical leftists, and thinking to themselves, maybe we should abandon the strategy, right, of starving our own people or something like that. So essentially, guys, right, there you have it. Now, going on to this topic itself of SNAP, I have a lot I want to talk about, but I first want to show you what Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker had to say about it, because while the Democrats are admitting, oh, shoot, we got to open the government, of course, what is, by the way, looking like the average SNAP recipient himself saying, well, it's all Donald Trump's fault. And again, this is the strategy that the hardcore Democrats are employing. Take a listen.
With the federal government shut down, there is the opportunity for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which runs SNAP, to take emergency funds that they already have and continue that program beyond November 1st, which is when the SNAP program would be shut down. They could keep that program going. They have been asked to keep that program going with those emergency funds, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, under the federal administration, under Donald Trump's administration, has said they will not use those funds to keep SNAP going, even though, as we know, there are many people that are on SNAP that cannot survive without the food that they might get with SNAP. So, I mean, this is, to me, I think all of us need to be concerned about what the future is for the program that supports 1.9 million people in the state of Illinois.
Wait, but why should they actually unfreeze those emergency funds? According to Democrats, because we've heard this for several months, using emergency money to pay out something that's not necessarily mandated or allocated by Congress is, of course, what? Unconstitutional and executive overreach. Oh, haven't they told us that a million times? Hadn't some Democrats, even unironically, not making it up, complained when Trump basically took out emergency funds and had private donors pay for the U.S. military and their paychecks? So why should they do that, actually? So that you guys can just continue on the shutdown here? I don't know. And again, there you go, blaming Trump for something that these Democrats have entirely created for themselves. But I'd like to note to you, J.B. Pritzker is not the only Democrat ambassador for SNAP, or as he accidentally called it, the snack program. I'd also like to show you this person right here, okay? So she works for a school district or something, claims she can't afford food. We are skeptical of this claim, I will say. But take a listen this week as, they basically, the Democrats use this person to make her the face of a potential nationwide starvation and famine that is allegedly coming if the SNAP program gets cut off. Yeah, take a listen.
Employee of the school district, I only get paid once a month. By the time I get my bills paid, I have nothing left to pay for food and other basic needs. If it wasn't for SNAP benefits, I wouldn't be able to feed my children or myself. I work, pay my bills, and like every other mom, I want to be sure that I have enough food to put on the table.
She's struggling to put food on the table, she says. Oh, really? Is that so? Again, we might have to dispute those claims. You mean to tell me you would starve if SNAP were put off the table? Again, not so sure about that. But yes, as usual, these are the type of people that Democrats apparently think it's smart to put out there because, as I've been trying to say, right, a huge component, yes, of the federal SNAP program and EBT, all of this stuff, is indeed massive fraud. And in many ways, you could argue not only does it subsidize and incentivize poverty, it is further incentivizing obesity, as a matter of fact. We're just learning more about this by the day. And by the way, another prime example, in my opinion, of how Democrats are kind of shining a light on an issue maybe they should want us not to talk about, because it never really was a discussion, at least this year in conservative circles. Hey, EBT, hey, how much fraud's going on there? We're talking a lot about the federal workforce and maybe other components of, government, Medicaid. There's a lot of reform of that through the big, beautiful bill. But now, hey, Democrats, thanks for shining a light actually on how broken SNAP is, because given what we're now learning through the government shutdown, maybe this is something that ought to be basically cut off as well, right? I would say, keep it for disabled people, keep it for elderly people. I didn't clarify that in the last video, and then a bunch of people got mad at me as if, I thought it was implied because I never mentioned elderly or disabled, but fine. Let me clarify. Keep it for that. But if you are a working age person and you're simply choosing not to work, or you just decide that you're going to use the food stamps because you need to eat like 1 million pounds of food, then yeah, it's actually going to be a vast improvement long-term on the lives of all Americans involved, whether it's the taxpayer, whether it's the people at the grocery store who actually pay for it, and they're going to get cheaper groceries because the U.S. government won't basically be subsidizing stuff, which always actually raise the cost in the end, or the recipients themselves, who are actually going to have to go work jobs and move upwards in life. And hey, maybe in a sense, I don't know, if you don't eat as much, hey, maybe you'll actually be a healthier person. This goes so many different ways. So as you can see right here, right, according to data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey from 2007 to 2010, I don't think this number has gone down. Let me just put it that way. Approximately 65% of SNAP recipients aged 2 years old and older were overweight and obese. 65% over 2 years old on food stamps, overweight and obese. Now, doesn't there seem to be a little bit of something broken about that, guys? The Democrats tell us that all the poor people are starving, and yet we see all these videos of them just buying junk food with the food stamps, which they don't have to do. And then they melted down, as you may remember, when RFK said no more sugary soda with food stamps because there's no nutritional value in that. No, we have a right to buy potato chips and food and soda. It's like, oh, so you mean to tell me you're not actually starving? I mean, clearly not, okay? Overweight and obese. Okay. This includes 25.5% who were overweight, for adults and equivalent for children, and 39% who were obese, guys. 39%. I assume that number's gone up. It's probably at least 50% nowadays, right? Food stamp recipients. Again, the supposedly starving people here in America are obese. Yes, that is correct. And, as we pointed out actually in the last video, but here's Matt Walsh's take on it. The number one thing that artificially inflates the price of groceries is the food stamp program. Also true. So if you're someone who's not on EBT, which is probably most of you, and you're like, I don't know if I care about this issue one way or the other, you actually should. You actually should celebrate all of the working, able-bodied people who just choose not to work being cut off of this, because the federal government is subsidizing groceries, as we pointed out, for 40 million people. That's how many, as they keep telling us, are on EBT and food stamps programs. Now, first and foremost, that number doesn't make any sense, right? Again, it literally cannot, it's numerically impossible for it to be the case that 40 million people in America are on the brink of starvation, and if we cut off food stamps, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves. You know why? Because the math simply does not bear out, as we talked about in the last video. In the 1960s, which is when food stamps were kind of, I believe, first introduced, so I'm not mistaken, right, through Great Society and all that stuff, the average American was spending about 13% of their disposable income on food, okay? By the 2020s, that number floats around 5%, which is to say what? Even when you factor in inflation and average median salaries and all that stuff, yes, certain goods like housing and real estate, for instance, gone way through the roof. But over time, food prices relative to economic factors has actually gone down. So if food prices are going down relative to average salary, how can it be the case that the number of people who need SNAP allegedly keeps on growing, and supposedly 40 million people are going to starve if we cut off SNAP? Well, again, because there's only one simple answer. The government is subsidizing, as you can see, not just poverty, but obesity. You have a bunch of people who, in many cases, either refuse to work or refuse to live responsibly, i.e. Some of the food stamp ambassadors that we have seen, and as a result, this is what you get, okay? And again, that drives up the cost of groceries, yes, for average people as well. So Trump, remember your campaign promise about lowering the price of groceries, and some Democrats are saying, you haven't done that yet, even though it's only been a year. Okay. I got your solution, Mr. President. It's called Next Reconciliation Bill. Do with food stamps what you did with Medicaid. Very easy. Watch how much grocery bills actually go down, and then let the Democrats lecture you about affordability, right, guys? Anyways, that's why the increase in groceries tracks exactly with the increase in the people on food stamps. So as a functional, contributing, working American, you're getting scammed twice. Once the government steals from your paycheck and gives it to EBT recipients, and again when you go to the grocery store. You're indeed paying twice so that morbidly obese people can buy Doritos on your own dime, infuriating, right? And even the new work requirement, I'd like to point out, only mandates that you work 80 hours in order to receive food stamps if you're an able-bodied working person of the right age, obviously, right? And it's like 80 hours. You should be working full-time. I mean, what, frankly, is the excuse for that? And the last point I would like to make about this is the third scam in this component, right? Because when you add that whole welfare industrial complex together, EBT, Section 8, Medicaid, all the grifting that is going on because people simply, yes, as we've established, are not working. They're living off the government. In the process, that's also incentivizing illegal migration. What do we mean by that? What have we been told by Democrats for not just the past year, but basically the past decade and even longer? We need the illegal aliens because the illegal aliens are working the low-skill, low-wage jobs that average Americans won't. Americans don't want to work in a field at farming or cleaning a house or a textiles factory or something like that. And it's like, I don't know if that's even true currently, but to the extent to which it is true, I wonder why that could be the case. Oh, perhaps it's because we have about 40 million people who are living as welfare grifters, okay? You're just subsidizing them to basically live off the government while simultaneously living essentially in poverty. And then, instead of, this is the stupidity of our government for the past several decades, instead of saying, okay, maybe we should get those people to go to work so that way our own American citizens can fill the labor shortage that incentivizing these people to not work, right, has created. No, instead they say, okay, let's bring in a bunch of illegal aliens. And then they're like, oh, but there's a labor shortage. Oh, it will work. So there's actually that third scam component too. There's a direct connection, right, between EBT and the border crisis for that very reason when it comes to this whole argument about the supposed shortage of labor. So think about that so deeply. And I again say here to Democrats, when it comes to EBT, when it comes to this government shutdown, perhaps in your own stupidity, you have shined a light on something very important, because we're not the only ones, right? A lot of conservatives are now talking about this who really were not covering it a lot before. And I think this needs serious reform. I, again, would go so far as elderly, disabled, that's it. And everyone else, working age, no more food stamps. Go find a job. Go out on your own. That's your freaking problem, right? And, this idea, oh, people will starve. No, we broke down the math. That's really not true. It's actually very difficult to starve in America, especially when food banks already exist. So what do you need food banks and EBT for? Also, explain to me how that makes sense. It should be one or the other, right? Well, of course, we know how this goes. So that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.